Great to be joined now by Luke West Poley to talk some Miami hoops. Miami of Ohio, the Redhawks having a fantastic season. Luke, you broadcast the games for student radio. You've been doing games for a while there. You and I have gotten to be good friends over the years of broadcasting. And I thought, you know what, with the season that Miami is having this year, let's get you on and update the people because I'm not covering Miami every day on this show like I used to. But this season, the Redhawks, for people listening right now, and I should say if you're watching this interview on YouTube, make sure you go subscribe to the audio platforms because this entire episode will be out on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, any of those. And if you're listening to this, make sure you go subscribe on YouTube. But Miami this season, Luke, you know this, but I'll update the people. 20-7 on the year as we record this. They are 11-3 in the MAC, but we are going to do this interview, and I'll take responsibility if they lose tonight because this is going to come out tomorrow. But they play Northern Illinois tonight. Northern Illinois is one of the worst teams in the country. We're going to do this interview operating under the assumption that Miami beats Northern Illinois tonight. Northern Illinois, 346th on KenPom right now. Miami checks in at 171st. They had a kind of a tough two-game stretch against Western Michigan and Eastern Michigan last week, but outside of that, just one other loss in MAC play, and that was to Akron earlier this season. Right now, Miami is second in the MAC standings as we approach the MAC tournament. That sets up you, Luke, to talk about this Miami team for people that haven't seen a second of Miami basketball this year and have maybe just seen that they've been winning games. What has this Miami season been like?
Well, first off, Paul, I'm a longtime listener, first-time caller into the Rebound Rundown, so thank you for having me. But, yeah, as for Miami, I think the biggest difference for them this year has been their depth. Travis Steele has said it all over the place throughout this year that year three was really the target when it came to the rebuild. And I think that they are probably the second deepest team in the MAC when you look around the conference. Akron is really good. They're currently leading the MAC. They actually suffered their first loss this past week to Ohio on the road. I thought they might go undefeated. But this Miami team is super deep. They can consistently run 9-10 deep into the bench. And I think that if you just watch the game, and the team dips deep into their bench, there are times where there's 5 underclassmen out there and you don't really notice. And it's been really fun to see for this team. They've got, a really talented freshman and sophomore class. Those are the two real recruiting classes, obviously, that Travis Steele has brought in with a full offseason. And the transfers have really complemented this team well. Obviously, the two leading scorers on this team are transfers between Pete Suter from Bellarmine and Cam Kraft from Xavier. But I just think the depth is the biggest thing that Miami was lacking. If you got into foul trouble, if your top guys weren't making shots in years past, that meant you lost the game by a long shot. And this year, that hasn't been the case.
You mentioned Cam Kraft, and that was a name I was just going to get to because a lot of people listening to this show are very familiar with that name after he transferred from Xavier. He had some struggles at Xavier at the Big East level, but I think we all knew that him being able to transfer to a school like Miami and play in a conference like the MAC that was maybe a little more suited for his game would elevate his level of play, and it's certainly done that. I feel like night in and night out, I'm seeing highlight reel after highlight reel of the play of Cam Kraft this season. I mean, you just look at a game a few weeks ago on February 11th against Toledo, went for 34 points, had 9 threes in that game, probably his best game of the season. But even all the way down the list for Cam, I know he's had a few games here and there, especially getting into the kind of the middle of January and early February where it was, single digit performances. But outside of that, he's had a really steady season.
Yeah, he's been really, really good. And, he was a guy that he wanted to play for Travis Steele, right? And as soon as he entered the portal, I think everybody knew where he was going. He wanted to play for Coach Steele. And like you said, I think that the coaching staff talks a lot about who they target in the portal and fit being the biggest thing. And I think this is a really good fit for Kraft. He's one of those guys where if you watch his game, he needs to have the ball in his hands a lot, I think, to be the most effective. And the thing with him at Xavier, obviously, he had some injury issues. He actually suffered a really bad knee injury that was almost career-ending near the end of his time at Xavier. But at a place like Xavier, it wasn't really possible for him to have the ball in his hands a lot just because there was so much talent on that roster. And he's a guy that, he's going to be really effective if he can play 30 minutes a game. And Miami's a place that he can do that. And I think what you've seen this year is Travis Steele has given him the reins to take a lot of shots, to take a lot of threes. They run him in a lot of different isolated sets and things where he can just work one-on-one and show his offensive talent. And I think it's been a lot of fun to watch. And I think, he's fit in really, really nicely into this system and into this program.
One other player to talk about here, Luke, Ian Elmer, because he has had some highlight reel dunks, plays. The post play of Elmer this year feels, to me at least, from what I've been able to watch, like it's elevated this team.
Yeah, it's been a game changer. I mean, he's one of those guys that is the most athletic player on the floor when he's out there. Super tall, high flying wing. He's from Taft High School in Cincinnati, where he played for obviously a powerhouse high school program. And when he was brought in last year, I think we saw flashes of that as a freshman, making plays with his athleticism. But I think this season, the biggest thing for Elmer is, he has taken that step. He's only missed one game this year. He missed the Eastern Michigan game, and Travis Steele said that was probably the hardest game to scout and to prepare for without Elmer all season, because of the type of player he is as a wing, to rebound the basketball and to be effective around the rim. And like you said, he's just a human highlight reel. I mean, it really produces momentum changing plays, it seems like, night in and night out, which is so big for this team. The energy, the morale. He's a guy that really provides that juice. And year two, really for this entire sophomore class for Miami, but specifically Elmer, he's taken a big, big step.
Okay, so the first loss in MAC play for Miami was a 27-point loss to Akron, 102-75, back on January 25th. Otherwise, they had been rolling through conference play until they got to that directional Michigan back-to-back of Western Michigan and Eastern Michigan. Lose by 8 to Western Michigan on Saturday, February 15th, and then lose by 10 to Eastern Michigan on the 18th, a few days later. What went wrong, Luke, in that 3-day stretch?
I think the shot making in the Western Michigan game was really tough. I think a lot of Miami fans had hoped this team was beyond the point where they'd been in the past couple of years, where they really needed to lean on the three as heavily as they did. In years past, they were a live and die by the three team. If you shoot the three ball well, you win. If you don't, you lose. This year, they had started to kind of figure out, it felt like, other ways to win. However, I think specifically in that Western Michigan game where they did not shoot the ball well at all, I think that was really the Achilles heel. As for the Eastern Michigan loss, I think it was on a smaller scale, pretty similar to Akron, in that they took a gut punch on the road in the first 5 minutes of the game and really just struggled to answer the rest of the game. They were down by almost 20, I think, at the under 8 timeout in that game, and rallied to get it down to around 8 or 9 or so, put in a decent push, but by that time there wasn't enough time left. So I think that is very similar to what happened in the Akron game. I mean, the Akron game was over 5 minutes into the game. They were not prepared at all, it looked like, to go on the road and play a Zips team that's very good and very deep, and you really cannot make mistakes and push against, because they will punish you. But I just think that the Western Michigan game was a little bit of a step back, which is a little disappointing, just in terms of having to lean on shot making, and when it didn't go their way, not being able to really pick it up, I think, with other facets. And the Eastern Michigan game, I think the response to adversity needed to be a little bit better than it was, and that's going to happen. I mean, this team is really good, but this team is still predominantly comprised of underclassmen. They've only got one player that's going to graduate this year. Dan Lewis is the only player on this roster that's out of eligibility, and he has not been a huge rotational piece. He's a captain for this team. He's a big locker room guy. He's a grad transfer from Eastern Illinois, but this is still a very young team, and they've got tremendous talent, and I think that is what is leading to wins. But I still think they are learning how to win, and I think you saw that over the last week.
All right, so then they respond from those two losses, Luke, and you come back home on a Friday night against Kent State and win an overtime game on national television on CBS Sports Network. The crowd looked electric. I watched this game. It was a ton of fun. Went to overtime. Miami gets the win. What does a win like that mean for this program on national TV in front of a home crowd that they had, beating Kent State? What does that win mean to Miami?
It's huge. I mean, that was the first nationally televised game in Millett Hall in 4 years. for those that aren't familiar with the MAC TV contract, I mean, they have games on national TV every week during conference play. So it's not as if, there's only one or two conference games that are nationally televised per year. And I think those that also follow the MAC know that this league goes through kind of decade-long ebbs and flows where there's the same group of 3 or 4 teams that tend to be really dominant. And over the last decade, that group has been Toledo, Akron, Kent State, and Ohio. And it has been really, really, really hard for anybody else, whether it was Miami, whether it was, Bowling Green or the Michigan schools, whatever it may be, to crack into that group and into that top 4. And I think what you're seeing is, for the first time in a number of years now, there is a team that is not only threatening to finish in that top 4, but probably is going to finish in that top 4, right, in Miami. And so a win over a Kent State team like that, obviously very well coached under Rob Senderoff. He and Travis Steele are both pupils of Kelvin Sampson from the Indiana days, but a huge win against a traditional MAC power. Kent State probably should have won the MAC championship last year. You can look at what happened in the final minute of that game. It was a little bit wild last season, and they actually made the tournament the year before that. So they've been one of the real marks of consistency in this league for a number of years, and getting a win like that, and especially in the way that they did with that crowd, down 7 with 2:40 left, rallying to tie. Ian Elmer had a huge block as time expired on what would have been a game-winning shot, and then made some clutch shots in overtime. So I think winning that game was huge, and doing it in the way that they did was pretty special, and the crowd was awesome, like you said, for sure.
The crowd coming back to Millette. This is the first 20-win season for Miami since Wally Ball, since Wally Zerbiak was there, 1999. That was the last time Miami won 20 games. They've already won 20 games, and there's still 4 games left in the regular season, plus whatever they're able to do in the MAC tournament and potentially the NCAA tournament if Miami can win the MAC. How have students responded to this team being good this year, the fans in general? Because it seems like there's a ton of energy around this team. And I know winning cures all. I always say that winning cures all. When you win games, the fans come back. But to do it so quickly this year and to fill the arena up like they have, it's been quick.
Yeah, it really has been. And I think, I grew up in Oxford. I've been a diehard Miami guy my whole life, that, Paul. And it's really crazy to think that Miami is considered, I think, one of the better whole athletic departments in the MAC. This isn't an athletic department that tends to settle for mediocrity, but this men's basketball program, I mean, they have hovered they've been a 500 at best team for my whole life. I mean, that is crazy. Their last NCAA tournament appearance was 2007. And like you said, I grew up coming to games, and I grew up going to a Millette Hall that wasn't that crowded. And that's what I think has made this rebuild so impressive to me from the coaching staff standpoint, because I think that there are certain elements to rebuilding a mid-major that are very unique that you don't necessarily have to deal with as a coaching staff at something like a high major level. Travis Steele never had to tell Xavier fans to show up to the Cintas Center. They always did it, and they always showed out for him. He had to do that at Miami. And I think, as you said, the winning has helped with that. And I think the response has been great, especially this year. But I think that it's not just the winning that has helped. I think there's really been a foundation laid over the first couple of years by this staff in this program to get students back in the seats. I think it's no secret that there's plenty to do on a Saturday afternoon in Oxford, Ohio, that doesn't involve basketball, right? And so for the coaching staff and the athletic department to get students to care again, I think has dealt with more than just winning. And I think that's been a really impressive and probably unsung part of this rebuild, is just the amount of effort that has gone into getting the fan base to buy in once again. And now they have, and it's made it really fun.
All right, I know you got to run, but I got 2 more quick questions for you here. First one is, if you're looking at Miami and what they have to do to make the NCAA tournament, what you're looking at is that January 25th result against Akron, where they got their doors blown off and didn't have a chance to beat the Zips. It looks like Akron is going to stand in their way as far as the MAC tournament goes. The way, it's just kind of shaping up. It feels like maybe these teams are on a collision course again to have a rematch there to play for a bid. Why should Miami fans have confidence that the second time around it could be different and they could come out on top?
I think when you look at the response to that Akron game, they owned it. I mean, this team operates on kind of the 24-hour rule typically when it comes to film. They don't watch film within 24 hours of a game, especially after a game like that. You'd think they'd want to cool it down, but they actually bust home from Akron that afternoon and watched film at like 9 o'clock that night because the coaching staff wanted the guys to own it. And then you look at what they did on Tuesday of that week. They were without Ian Elmer, who was their best rebounder, probably just in terms of athleticism, against an Eastern Michigan team that's the biggest team in the MAC, and they crushed them at Millett Hall. And I think that was a big step for this team. I think you're probably not going to see a game like that if Miami sees Akron again. I mean, that was just such an egg that was laid down by this team on the road. And games like that happen, right? But I don't think that you would see that in a tournament environment just because a team would be ready to play. But if they're going to beat Akron, I mean, Akron is incredibly deep. You're going to have to go into your bench just like the Zips will. It's been really impressive what Akron has done because they've actually lost two NBA-level prospects from last year to this year, both Enrique Freeman, who was Player of the Year in the conference last season, and Ali Ali. And they're poised to win the league again. And John Gross, who, of course, is the half-brother of Travis Steele. Those guys know each other very well, and that's going to be an interesting chess match to see if they face off against each other again. But yeah, I think you're just going to have to go deep into your bench. Staying out of foul trouble has been a big issue at points for this Miami team. That's going to be very crucial. I think they got into a little bit of foul trouble early in that Akron game, and that certainly didn't help. And they're going to have to shoot the three ball well. I mean, to beat a team like Akron, they are so good that you are really going to have to be at your best. And Travis Steele has said it before too. Toledo has won this league 4 years in a row in the regular season and has not gone to the NCAA tournament because there has to be a little bit of luck to win 3 games in 3 days. It's just the reality of it. And so you'll have to be at your best, sure, but to beat a team like Akron in the postseason, some stuff's going to have to go your way. That's just the reality, I think.
All right, last question for you, Luke. There's been a lot of talk about a new arena for Miami. Where's it going to go? Is it going to happen? Any update you know of where or what might happen with a new arena?
So much like the downtown arena in Cincinnati, the new arena in Oxford is something that has been floated for years and years and years and years, and typically tends not to go anywhere, right? It sounds like this one is going to happen. It's going before the board. They had students vote on potential location for it last week. The recommendation was to put it on the Cook Field site. If you've ever been to Oxford, and anyone listening knows where that is, right by Poley Tower, which is a very historic location on Miami's campus. But hopefully it's going to be smaller. That's the idea, right? And not a ton of updates as of now. Still has to go through some things, and will still take a few years, obviously. But I think for those that have been to Millett Hall, they have known for years that thing needs to be updated. Charlie Coles said it with the Columbus Dispatch, legendary Miami head coach. I think back around the early 2010s, I mean, probably 15 years ago at this point, that Millett Hall needed to be updated, and that was then. So Millett Hall, certainly a historic venue, but I think Miami fans would be excited for a new one, and hopefully a smaller arena, get some atmosphere in there. I think they're targeting around 6,000 to 7,000 seats on a new arena, which I think would be a great sweet spot. Millett Hall's around 10,000, which is very, very big for a MAC school, especially in a place like Oxford that's a little off the beaten path. But 6,000 to 7,000 seat arena, probably on Cook Field, might take a few years. But I think we're actually going to get some pretty reliable updates on that in the coming months when things go before the board and such. So
I think, like you said, a sweet spot of that 6 to 7 number. You look all around college basketball. I mean, Baylor just did it. The downsizing, not only downsizing the number of seats, but condensing the footprint of the building to make the noise of the smaller amount of fans more impressive on the court and more of a factor. All of that is happening across the sport.
Yeah, it is. And I think the Baylor example that you gave is like a really good one, right? Because that's even a high major that's saying, we'll take the lost revenue for a couple games a year by not having as many seats, but packing it out and making it loud. I think another thing that fans don't love and players don't love about Millett Hall is there's a giant indoor track that goes around the court. And if you sit in the front row, you're 20 feet back from the floor, which isn't great. And when you look at some of the better venues in the MAC, the Toledos, the Akrons, the fans are right on top of the floor. And even if there's a couple thousand people in there on a Tuesday night, it gets loud. And I think that's what everybody really wants, because the atmosphere makes it fun. I don't think you need to sell the 10,000 seats for an arena to be loud. And yeah, I think that the downsizing would be a wise decision, and I think that's the direction that, like you said, not only Miami but really everybody in the sport is going, because I think that's the best way to do it.
Anything anybody should know that you haven't touched on already about Miami basketball going into the rest of the regular season?
It's a historic year, man. And, Travis Steele just signed a contract extension. I think he just bought a new house as well. The foundation is laid. And I think that the biggest thing I can emphasize is this is not a portal team. This is not a team of grad transfers, or, there's not going to be one and dones in the MAC, but nothing like that. I mean, this team is built to last, and it's done that way on purpose. And so I think that, when April rolls around and the season is over, nobody should be forgetting about this team. I mean, this program, I think, is going to be really, really good for the years to come, and I think that's going to be really exciting.
Luke, tell the people where they can find you.
I'm on Twitter at Luke West Poley. That's probably where I'm the most active. Trying to tell myself that I should interact with people on Twitter more. Maybe this will be the thing that finally convinces me. So you can find me there. As for radio stuff, at Redhawk Radio on Twitter, on YouTube. We do lots of content shows. We have live broadcasts of Miami Athletics. Plenty of stuff there. So,
Luke, you're great at what you do. I always appreciate when our paths cross on a broadcast or whatever else. You guys, you do a really great job. So I appreciate you coming on here and spending the last 20 minutes talking about a special team up there in Oxford. And look, I know you're not on the team, but as a radio guy, you feel like you are at least a part of what's happening there, as somebody that lives and dies with everything game in and game out. So I know you feel that way, and best of luck to you and the Redhawks over these last few games.
Paul, thank you. Always love the Rebound Rundown. It's my morning listen, so appreciate you taking the time.
I love that. See you, Luke.
See ya.